you very much, friends. So now let us have all our ears to listen and learn from our expert speaker, Mr. Manish Srivastava. If you have any questions, please post in chat box and he will handle the questions at the end of the session. So the screen is all yours, sir. I will share the screen. Yes, sir.
Is I'm audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay, fine, perfectly fine. So it's my pleasure to be over here, and I would pay gratitude to Icon Advisory, as well as to WIB Women in Business, and especially to Nehal for taking the initiative for this session. And so today, as you all know, as well as what Nehal has also said in the opening statement, like Cars24 has become a unicorn, and that is how the entire setup, like how the entire dynamics of the business is changing. And as we all know, like we are in a different world now. We are all being into a pandemic state. The world is in a different league now, and there have been challenges to the business. All those business which we have well settled earlier, now they also facing challenges. They need a tweaking in their business model, and the business model need to be made according to the new market dynamics. So now, like what may be the settled business model earlier may not be in the current context, will be a settled. They also have to come, and there are the challenges that need to be faced, right? So in this session, I will be majorly talking about like how to go about with the valuation. But before moving forward, like there being the companies which being matured companies, and there are the companies which are on a very starting stage, or the companies which have not reached to the maturity stage, right? It may be like the A series or B series funding has happened, and still they are looking for the growth side. Okay. So when we say like how to value about it, so for different companies, the valuation methodology may be different. Okay. But in general parlance, when we say like how to value any business, there are basically three approaches to valuation. Okay, I will come to that later. But before moving into that part as well, we need to understand when is the valuation required, or as a valuer, what you can value. Whether a valuer can value everything, whether a valuer can able to value the love, affection. These are the things which are of not economic in nature. Any valuer can't value these concepts, right? So we need to understand like a valuer can only value things which are economic in nature. Those things which are not economic in nature, no valuer can come and value it. If you look into, suppose we have a beautiful Taj Mahal in India. Okay, you can
Yeah.
turn on the slide. So there's a beautiful Taj Mahal in India. If somebody says that you being a very good valuer, can you come and value that? No valuer in the world can value Taj Mahal. The reason being because it is something of archaeological importance. There's nothing like a market which exists that there's a buyer and the seller. They may be different, like buyers that they can say that I will love to own Taj Mahal, but there will be no seller. So we need to look into like under which market dynamics a valuer values anything. Okay. There being the time when people used to say like valuation is majorly run on the basis of the size of the balance sheet of the company. Like when you have a strong balance sheet, lot of assets in the balance sheet, then the value of your company will be very big, right? So if you look into the current context, gone are the time now when you see like it is not like the balance sheet size. It is not about like what sort of assets, land, building, plant, machinery you hold in your balance sheet. It is more about what intellectual value you possess. That is more important and relevant in the current context. Okay, you start a small app. There may be like a company like WhatsApp. They have started an app and they have become $1 billion companies. So how they become those? So now the market dynamics talks about the number of customers. It talks about like how you scale your business, what is the traction of your business. So these are the important things which are coming beside the balance sheet asset side. Okay. Anybody can start a business today with just a very small, like a rented premises, just having 2 laptops, starting with the 2 co-founders, and they can start running the business from day one. There's no need of any like so much of the resources, like the monetary consideration. So the restriction has gone away. So it is more about like the concept that you built into. Like take an example. there are a lot of things which can come up in the time to come. Anybody can take an initiative and can disrupt the market. Suppose I take an example. There is a stock market, and I want the information from the stock market that what are the top 10 stocks today, which has a P multiple of 40 and which has a price to book value of suppose 3 or 4. I have to go research it out, find it out, which are the companies. So now if any startup comes up and say that we will use the artificial intelligence and will churn the data in a way that whatsoever information that will be asked will be immediately able to provide it just with the tip of the button, then immediately that problem will be solved, right? So these are the new things that will be required by the market. Okay, if you look into like there being a bank in America with the name of Chime Bank, which opened the bank account in just 2 minutes with just the voice calls. There have been certain information exchange and and they say welcome. Okay. Then there's a Bank of America with a huge robust system, but they're not able to meet the demand or open the bank account in 2 minutes time. That is the disruption in the market. That is the new companies coming up, and they, based on the intellectual value, they are changing the roadmap or the things moving ahead. There being a very good proverb that being said by Mr. Narayan Murthy that every day the entire value of Infosys comes at 9:30 in the morning and it leaves the premises at 6 o'clock in the evening. So what he's talking about? He's talking about the intellectual value. He's talking about the human value. It is talking about about the technology integration that has taken place. Okay. Now the question arises. On one side, like suppose you are valuing some company which being on a very high growth stage. If you look into the net asset value of the company, the net asset value is not justifying the value proposition of that company. We need to look at what is the model, what is the business model, what is the scalability factor, how the company will move forward, and how the potential value will be harnessed. So these are the important criteria that needed to be looked at before valuing any business or the new stage business, we can say. Okay. So these are the times when we don't look at the companies like net asset value, because those are the days when we talk about manufacturing companies, that net asset value become more relevant at that point of time. Okay. So the investor may be looking at, if you have a beautiful idea, okay, that idea can be scalable, that can be worked on different geographies, then of course the company has a value proposition. Okay. And they make the investment based on that. Very tricky thing is this, like people say that value is the business first and then the investments take place. In most of the cases, the situation is on a reverse side. It's already been decided by the promoters and the investors already settled, okay, this is the value at which I will make investment. And then it comes to the valuer that now you value it based on this, that we are making the investment at this particular price. So one question that is there, is the valuer valuing or finding the value of the business or the valuer finding the price of the business? Okay. When somebody is saying to you, the value of my share should be 3,000 per share value, and you are doing the backward calculation and bringing the 3,000 rupees value, are you a valuer? Or in that case, are you just being juggling with the numbers and finding that this is the number that will be settled and what the regulator will take into consideration? Okay. So these are the things that we need to look into, like how the valuation need to be settled. There are another thing. A lot of the valuers, they are looking at the projections that are being provided by the management. Okay. And they are saying that, okay, the management has provided the projection. So based on these projections, we will do the value. Okay. Is this a right way of looking at it? Because as a valuer, there is a certain amount of validation that you need to do. You need to look into like what is whether the company, what the management is projecting as a projection, that they will do this thing, they will achieve this much of turnover, this much of profitability, whether the company actually will be able to achieve it or not. That may be the validation point. We need to look into the sector, the segment, like under which segment my company falls. Okay. So if suppose the comparable companies in the market, they are not getting the margin, like they are in the margin range of suppose 10% or 12%, and you are saying no, my company will be in the margin of 30% as per your projection. So as a valuer, you have to talk to the management and say, sir, the projection that you provided is hyperbolic in nature. This projection will not work according to market dynamics. And if you are adamant to whatever you are saying, then you show me two, three things to me. That what is the reason behind it, first of all. Okay. Why you are saying that your projection will be very different? Is you are creating a very different setup? If is your business model is different from the comparable company business models, something unique is there. Do you have the order book in place? Suppose you have the very strong order book, you got an order. Suppose you started a company and you started making, suppose, a vaccine. Okay, any company started, suppose Zydula is a company and Zydula was doing something and now they started making the vaccine. And suppose they come up, okay, we find the medicine or the vaccine for corona, and this has a suppose it's 75 or 80% success rate. Okay, then this is a very different league now, because already so much of the demand exists in the market. And if I am there to cater to the demand of the market, of course, my future is going to be very different what is used to be the past numbers. Okay. So we need to address or look into whether the future is different or it is going in the similar way. Okay. Now, can you come to the slide? Is the slide visible? I'm not able to see the slide. So anyway, so when we talk about like how to go about the valuation, there have been basically three approaches to valuation in the entire universe or in the entire world. There is not fourth methodology or the approach that exists in the market. The very first approach, when we say, is the asset approach. The another is the income approach, and the third is the market approach. When I say the asset approach talks about asset approach talks. Yeah, next slide. You can move to the next slide. Next slide. Yeah. So one important thing is, like, before moving into the approach of this slide, I would say, like, the very first question is, when we say what is the purpose of the valuation, why we are valuing the company. Suppose we are valuing the company for any investment round, then the value will be very different. And suppose I've been valuing the company for employee stock option purpose, the value may be different. So based on the purpose of the valuation, the value of the company changes. Somebody may say, sir, valuation is a fair value for everything. Why you are saying, somebody may say a counter question and ask, like, why you are saying that the value will be same for everything? The reason being, because it depends upon the stake. What is the stake that is there involved in the transaction? If there's a minority stake or there's a majority stake. Okay. So the valuation is dependent upon, like, for what that somebody is coming and taking 30% stake of my business. Okay. Making investment in my business, 30% stake he is taking, and I'm diluting 30%. Then the question that arises, 30% is a majority stake, minority stake, or what? So as per the books, generally you say, as per the Companies Act, 50% is the controlling stake. It does not always, like, 30%, 50% is a controlling stake. There may be a scenario like even 10%. Suppose if I'm saying that I want to take 10% stake of Reliance. then 10% is also a majority stake, because I will be saying that I need a seat in the board of directors, and I need these are the informations that I require from you from time to time on a quarterly basis. Okay, so we need to understand it is not only about 50%, it may be like 10%, and that may be the controlling stake. Okay, so depending upon the stake, we look into like whether it's a minority valuation, majority valuation, and the value per share also changes based on like for what thing you are valuing. Okay. So in front of you, like there being a slide called valuation approaches. So these are the three asset, income, and market. These being the three approaches to valuation. When I say asset approach are generally being not used when we say that we are running going concern basis. It is only being used in those cases where the companies are huge asset based. Like suppose DLF, Unitar, these are the companies which have land banks. And when I say land banks, because when you look into the income approach of these companies, then the income approach may not able to capture the value what the asset they possess, because a lot of the asset what they have in the balance sheet, they may not be creating the revenue stream. A lot of the inventories are vacant, right? So when we say asset based approach, it may be relevant for companies which are huge asset based companies. That may be one of the things. But when we say like we are a service company, we are technology based company, we are a company which being into the artificial intelligence, robotic science, then we need to look into like what is the cash flow that these companies will able to create in the time to come. So then we generally look into the discounted free cash flow methodology and say that based on the future cash flow, the value of the company is so much and so. Okay. Now, the question that arises is discounted free cash flow method is the most logical method? Because everybody talks about discounted free cash flow. The question is discounted free cash flow until and unless validated is a wrong model to suggest, because if you have not validated the projections and you're just saying based on your calculation, based on the projection which can never be achievable, and saying that this is the value, then you are in a wrong, then you are finding the wrong value of the company. So before moving into the discounted free cash flow, we always need to validate it with the comparable companies method. We need to look into what are the comparable companies which exist in the market, right? Suppose you are a startup, you will not be able to find a company which being a listed company in your segment, because your segment is entirely different. You are coming up with a new idea and there's no comparable company that exists in the market. Okay. Then we need to look into what are the private limited companies which exist in the market and which have secured certain funding from the investors. So we need to look into like what sort of turnover, what sort of EBITDA, or even if not they are able to achieve the EBITDA number, they are still only at the revenue stage and still into losses. We can look into like what sort of funding these companies able to achieve or get from the investor, and how the investor looks into this particular segment. So it's all depend upon in this segment you are. I can't say like I starting a business into a textile company and I starting something into the artificial intelligence or robotic science or something which is very technical in nature. Then the two segments are different. So the values of these will also be going to be very different. Okay, because the investor which get attracted is not only based on like what is your past is, but they're looking into what is going to be the future, because past may be very good, but if the future does not command based on the technology what you have. Take the example of company called Nokia at one point of time is the number one, and now Nokia is nowhere because they're not able to adapt the technology which is in place, and because of that they are out of market now. Okay, so we need to look into now one important thing. Somebody may ask a question, sir, you are saying like a private limited company, you look into from where I can find the data for the private limited company. Is there any data available? Because there is nothing like the price is being traded in the BSE or the NSE, the company is unlisted one, how to go about that? So what you can do is you can log into mca.gov.in, and then you find out like in your company segment which are the private limited companies, and you can download the balance sheet and the P&L statement from the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, and then you can look into like what is their financial numbers are, and when the transaction or the investor has made investment in this company, what is the revenue, what is the EBITDA number, or what is the profitability the company was having at that point of time. So this will help you in providing the validation for what you are saying and what you are doing. Okay. There may be some company which may come up and say, sir, this is a company which is the only unique company in the world, and there is no comparable company. You can't compare my company with other companies, and there may be a scenario, but still, whatsoever you are, you can't be out of industry. You have to be in the industry segment only. Okay. So then we can look into like how the industry of that particular segment is behaving, and how the industry or the segment is actually moving in that direction. Okay. So this is basically the way forward how to look at by determining the value proposition of any company. Okay. So we need to look into the profit margin. We need to look into like what sort of funding that has taken place in my comparable companies. So it will provide you a benchmark how to take my valuation forward. Okay. So then there's another way of like looking at, which is option pricing method and the price of decent investment method, in which option pricing method, that is the contingent claim method, in which we generally use for the option pricing. Like we say, like suppose the company is providing the employee stock option. So options are not equitatious as on date. These options will become equity at a later point of time. So when they will become equity, so because I've been valuing as on date, I have to apply the binomial methodology, and in which case we can apply the Black-Scholes methodology or the binomial methodology. So we need to look into like what sort of method is most suitable in order to find like what is going to be the future is. Okay, because option will get converted into equity at a later point of time. Okay. Next slide, please. Uh, One thing more important is we need to look into the premise of valuation. Whether we are valuing the company as a going concern basis, or we are valuing the company on the basis like it will go into liquidation. Because now these days, like a lot of the insolvent companies are coming, and the IBBI is scattering or looking into how to like make these companies good, how to invite the bidder, and who can come and take over the management of these companies. Okay. So we need to understand, like suppose if you are saying that my company is going for liquidation, I can't apply the discounted free cash flow because there's not going to be the future. Okay. Then that will be majorly like the asset valuation that will take place. Okay. Another thing is, suppose you're saying that my company will continue forever, then we don't have to apply the liquidation methodology. Then we need to look into the cash flow possibility and what is the uh, potential value that will be harnessed by the company in time to come. Okay. So these are the ways to look at like what we are valuing. Another thing, generally people say that valuation is an art, or it's a science, or it's a hybrid of the art or science. I lay an example to that. Suppose there are two companies, one company being run by a person who is 75 years of age, who does not have any succession planning. There is no daughter, no son of this person, but this company has worked phenomenally well in the past and backed all the like the gold medals and everything, corporate governance award, everything. This company, and there's another company which is run by three professional directors, age maybe 45, 50, and this company has the numbers, that is the P&L and the balance sheet, exactly the same that being run by the person having 75 years of age. Will the value of the two companies will be same different, or what is going to be? That may be the question point. Okay, because when you say like valuation is based on numbers, I would say that it is not only based on numbers, it is based on certain qualitative factors as well. So what are those qualitative factors? The qualitative factors may be promoter's background, the technology integration, it may be like what sort of customers or the client the company has. So we need to understand like what we are looking at and how we are applying the model, and based on that we need to value the company. Okay, so these are the basic guidance that we need to look into, like how to value the company. Now everybody is saying that okay, we apply the comparable company method. So when you say comparable company method, what is the right multiple? Is it the sales multiple, revenue multiple? It may be the EBITDA multiple. It may be the PAT multiple, PE multiple. What sort of multiple may be relevant? That may be the question point. Because somebody may come and say that we should apply PE multiple. Somebody will say that we will apply the EBITDA multiple, and the values may be different. What need to be do? Not what needed to be done. So in that scenario, we need to look into what is the business model of the company. Suppose I take like a company called Paytm. Paytm as on date is into losses. And if I apply the P multiple into Paytm, it will give us zero value because the profitability of the company is negative. So I would say that, okay, I apply the P multiple and the value of the Paytm should be negative or zero. Is it so? So we need to look into, when we apply any sort of multiple, what is the business model of the companies? When I say the asset-based companies, we generally need to look into the price to book value multiple. When we say like, okay, this is a company which been running successfully for n number of years, reach a mature stage, we can apply the PE multiple. But there may be a question point. You are taking the PE multiple of the listed peer companies. And these listed peer companies, these are the companies in which the due diligence has already happened. And they have reached to a certain stage or certain level. I've been comparing my company with a listed peer company, and I being a private limited company, whether I should get the same value proposition as those companies are getting. Because the P multiple that they are getting, suppose directly I've been applying to my company is a private limited company, so there's a liquidity issue. An investor who's coming into a private limited company, he can't take an exit like today he's making investment and 3 days after he's taking an exit. He can't do so. But when any investor making investment into a listed entity, then they can take an exit 1 day after. So the question that arises is, there's a liquidity thing or the liquidity discount which need to be built into any sort of multiple when you are comparing it with a listed peer company. And that is called discount on lack of marketability. Okay. So these are the things that we need to look at when applying the multiple directly. Another point, a lot of the companies, which being a private limited companies, they are not reflecting their true profitability, because on the profit they need to pay the tax and they don't want to pay so much of the tax. So what they do, that in the last quarter they build n number of the fictitious, like these are the expenses that we have made, and then the profitability is coming down. So now you talk to the promoter and you are supposed to apply the P multiple, and the value as being a very suppressed value you derive. They may be asking a question to you, sir, this is not the value. My value is something very higher. The audited balance sheet, what it is reflecting as a profitability is not the correct profitability. In actual parlance, we draw 30% margin and my profitability is of 30%. But my P&L statement is reflecting 10% margin because certain expenses being built. So we have to be very cautious while applying the P multiple. We need to look into the revenue or the EBITDA. EBITDA may be the more correct version of the thing, because most of the expenses that will be booked are post the EBITDA numbers. So we need to look into the EBITDA multiple, maybe a better way to looking into like finding the value based on comparable company methodology. But if there are company which being a matured company and the profitability, what you are saying and what is reflecting in the books are the same, then of course you can apply the P multiple as well. Okay, next slide, please. Now, and one thing like generally the valuer things like they should start the working from the P&L and the balance sheet numbers. I would suggest as a valuer, we need to look into the top-down approach. We need to look into like what is the sector is one, what is the segment in which the company is, and then what is the company is. Okay, so that is the top-down approach because until and unless we're not able to understand our sector, if there are certain challenges in the sector, suppose, and we have not looked into those challenges, then we are applying the wrong model. Okay, suppose about 8 months back when there was no corona, then the restaurant business that had been flourishing very well. But these days, what is happening? Nobody going to the restaurant. So the entire like that model has changed into the cloud kitchen model. Okay, so we need to understand like what segment we are valuing and whether the industry market is supporting that segment or not. Okay. So before moving into the valuation, we need to look into like the certain thing like the promoter background, the segment or the sector, sectoral reports. There are a lot of sectoral reports which are available. You can look and browse at ibef.org. So you can download the sectoral reports from there and see like how the sector is performing. Okay, then we can look into like there are a lot of the government data which comes into and saying that this is how the index is moving, this is how the industrial productivity index is moving. So these are the things which can always be, as well as we can also look into the reports of the agencies like Crystal Care, which are the rating agencies, like what these agencies are saying about the company instruments like the debt instruments, or they are also like measuring the IPO of the companies, like whether the IPO that they are coming up, whether that being what sort of rating they will get for that. So we need to look and understand these things before moving into the real number side. Okay. It is not only about the P&L and the balance sheet. We also need to look into like the things like contingent liability which the company is having. We need to look into the things like what is the director's speeches, what the chairman is saying about the future. So so these are the things we have to go to the annual report rather than just looking into the audit balance sheet and the P&L statement. Okay, so these are the sources of information which we need to look into while uh, finding the value or deciphering the data, or finding like what sort of things we need to look into before moving to the number game. Next slide, please. So, key driver of valuation, when we say everything comes and concludes at the cash flow. Okay. Suppose there being a very beautiful hotel, and that's a five-star hotel, that being on the outskirt, uh, very beautiful hotel, but the number of people which are visiting to this hotel, or the number of number of rooms which are booked are not something which are very attractive in nature. Suppose only 10 rooms are getting booked in 1 week only, but the hotel is very beautiful. The land cost is huge in that particular location. As an investor, what you look into, whether you look into the asset that the company, the hotel has so much of the asset, or you look into what is the cash flow that will be created, because you are not interested in the assets of the hotel. You are more interested is today I'm making the investment in that hotel, and this hotel will be creating the cash flow. I'll be getting the benefit. The company value is going up, not just based on the appreciation in the land and building, but based on business. So the investor is more looking into the like how the cash flow will be built, how the model, how the business model will move, rather than like the fixed asset of the hotel. Okay, so we need to understand what attracts the investor. Investor is more looking into your business model, your cash flow, rather than looking into the assets of it, because he is not coming for a long term. He is coming for maybe 5 years and he wants an exit after 5 years. If you are not able to create the cash flow, you're not able to provide him an exit. So these are the things that needed to be looked at. Okay. Then another thing is there may be operating assets and there may be non-operating assets. When I say operating assets, suppose the promoter is running a factory in 1 acre of land and 9 acres of land. 9 acres of land is vacant. Okay. So now when you say like what is the value, whether 9 acres should be taken in the valuation or 9 acres should be left, because these are 9 acres are the non-operating assets. So as an investor, I've been coming and making investment in your factory, which is into the 1 acre land. I am not the owner of your I am not the owner of your land. I don't want to make investment in your land. So I would say that please talk about your operating assets and what is the revenue model and what is the cash flow model of your companies. So as an investor, for the investor, the operating assets are relevant, but for the promoter who has this land, 9 acres, for the promoter, that may be relevant because he may later on sell that land, but because the land is not useful for the factory, so I will not be considering it while valuing the business of the factory. Okay. Next slide, please. So there are there's a lot of like approaches to valuation. A lot of people they say like we need to do the valuation as per different approaches, and then we need to do the average of that and find the value based on the average. Is it a right approach to do that? I, as a valuer, would suggest this is not the right approach, because if I apply the net asset value, suppose of a company called Paytm, the my value will be coming minuscule in comparison to the DCF valuation that the company is fetching. So we need to understand what sort of company we are valuing, and based on that, we need to apply the approach to valuation. We should not just on the basis of like method, we need to apply. We should apply more of the brains rather than the numbers. Valuation is not only about a number crunching, is more about understanding the in-depth knowledge of that. When I say the art and science is valuation is a combination of that, it means certain amount of experience that being required to understand the industry, the segment, the what is the government regulation is there. All these things needed to be looked into and given the flavor to the numbers, just rather than just looking at the number side. Okay. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Go and go to the next slide. So there may be certain industry risk factors, that what are the competition in the market, what is the regulation, what is the industry life cycle, whatsoever things may be relevant in February, previous February, may not be relevant today because the entire dynamics has changed. So we need to see like how the industry is moving, how the economy is moving, and based on that, we need to find in the current context what should be the value of my company. Next slide, please. So there is a concept called rule of thumb. Like a promoter does not go into the technicalities, like going into DCF, comparable company. They have their own way of measuring the things. Suppose I being the owner of the 5-star hotel and that have 100 rooms, and I have in my mind that okay, one room equals to 1 crore, 100 rooms I have, so 100 crore should be the value. Suppose if I go in Delhi and want to take a 3 BHK house in Saket or in the South Delhi, then of course we know that it will be costing around 40,000, 50,000 rupees. I can't say that you as a landlord is charging more because my DCF model is saying something different, right? So these are the customary approaches that people generally follow, the promoter generally follow, that okay, because the market is saying it so, Based on that, the value of my company should be this much. But as a valuer, you need to prove it on a scientific basis that, okay, applying the method, applying this methodology, the value of my company is coming this much. Okay. So this is the role of the valuer, to find like what should be the value based on the scientific basis rather than just on the rule of thumb basis. Okay. Next slide. Next slide. Now one question I would ask from all of you, when we say like discounted free cash flow, the value that I've been deriving, whether it captures the intangible value of the business or it just capture the tangible value. Okay, because a lot of people would say that it is only like the tangible. Yeah, please. Hello. Yeah, anybody want to say something? So I would say, like when I say discounted free cash flow captures the tangibles and the intangibles both. The reason being, I take an example. Suppose if I wish to purchase an Arrow shirt, I have in my mind the Arrow shirt will come approx in the range of 3,000 to 4,000 rupees, maybe in the range of 3,000 to 4,000 rupees. Okay. When I say 3,000 to 4,000, why? The reason being, because I already been building the value, the brand value of Arrow shirt. Because I want to purchase Arrow, I have a mindset, okay, this is Arrow, this is the logo, and I would willing to pay 3,000 or 4,000 rupees. If I go to a market, any market, which is a Kirana market or normal like Nehru Place in Delhi, there you can get the shirt in 500 rupees as well. So is 500 rupees there you will pay 3,000 rupees? No, because there is no brand value attached to that. So when you say like discounted free cash flow, the profit margin that been there, so that sort of things already captures the intangible, the brand and everything. So discounted free cash flow is a consolidated value capturing every aspect of the thing. Okay. So this question that comes in the mind, it is it is not an intangible value. You have to find separately the intangible value. It is not like that. When we need to find the separate value, like suppose my company has a patent, suppose my company has a trademark, brand name, customer list, these are the things which are of intangible nature, and I have to find the value, suppose, of these things. These things need to be found when we are doing purchase price allocation. That suppose there is a transaction that has happened and I paid as an investor to a company, then I have to book in my books of account, like for what thing I have paid for. It is only for the goodwill, because if I'm not bifurcating all these things, the entire amount will be going into the goodwill portion, the asset and the goodwill portion. And the goodwill portion will be very huge. So a person, the auditor may ask like, sir, please bifurcate the goodwill amount into the identifiable tangibles and into the non-identifiable intangibles. The things which you're able to identify, these are the intangibles, you say, these are the value will be assigned to that. What is the balance portion will go into the goodwill part. Okay. So this needed to be done when we say purchase price allocation. Otherwise, we don't apply the intangible valuation. Another point, suppose I started a company, I built the repute, I built the name, and for n number of years, 7 years, 10 years down the line, I'm saying that because I have built so much of the brand, so much of the intangible value in my company, I need to book certain things in my books of account as an intangible. Self-created intangible, self-created, what you have created, what you have not bought from somebody. Those things are not booked into the books of account. But suppose if you are saying that my company is purchasing another company and that brand I am also taking, and that for that brand, then that intangible you can book in your books of account. Okay. So this is needed to be looked at, what needed to be booked and what we cannot book. Okay. of course, the value is going up, but you can't book as an intangible. Okay. Next slide, please. Next slide. Any question till this point? If somebody, any question that is coming, I can elaborate, or I can deliberate later, as per your convenience.
Or are there any tools available for valuation of your company? Maybe a small firm of a solo entrepreneurship or a sole entrepreneur. Is there a way, or is there a small
Correct. Yeah.
tool available to value online, or it can be taken as advisory only in consulting?
There are certain calculators which are available online, that if you have so much of the revenue, that will be so much of the traction, then you can say that this is the value of your company. Okay. But those are not authentic. You cannot say that, because that's what I've been saying, that numbers cannot create the value. It is not only the numbers. Suppose I take example. I start a business, or Nehal starts a business, and suppose Sundar Pichai starts a business. The same business, everything remains same. Okay. I will able to secure the funding, or Mr. Sundar Pichai able to secure the funding. There is a big difference between the two, right? Because everybody knows him, because he is well connected to the investor. Because if he is thinking something, then people will say, okay, that is 100% sole proof that he is going to get success. I'm not saying whether he will get 100% or not, but people have this sentiment in their mind. So we need to understand, like, what, how the valuation of the startup needed to be looked at. Okay. I don't have any financial number. I don't have the balance sheet, the P&L. I have started certain things 6 months back only. How to value about my company? This needed to be done based on a scorecard methodology. When I say scorecard, a scorecard takes into consideration certain factors which are qualitative in nature. Like, it may be the promoter's background. Who is the promoter? Who is the co-founder? Who is the team? What is the team? What is the size of the team? What is the qualification of the team? Suppose I started a company and I take some people just from the BCom background, just 10th standard pass, then that will be very different. And I started a company and started hiring the people from IITs, IIMs, then that will be a very different story, right? So this is basically the scorecard in which what the investor looks into. The investor looks into promoter background, co-founder, technology integration. How you able to break through based on your technology platform that you are talking about. Because the investor first thing is need to understand how you will scale your business. Do you have the technology backup or not? Or just on the like word of mouth, or just being meeting people? Because like I've been sitting over here, Nehal is sitting somewhere else, we are sitting in different part of the world, but what is happening, we are all coming together because of the platform, because there's a Zoom and we are now talking to each other. Okay. So we need to understand, and as well as like what is the competition in the market, right? If suppose if somebody comes to say you and say, I will start a business and I will take over Ola, Uber, then what you would say? Then you will laugh and say that what he's saying, because these have become so big players. If anything you start in this segment, immediately in the one year down the line, if you have certain unique propositions, they will purchase your business. They will say, okay, fine, I want to make investment, and you will not find any so much of the money from anybody else, because they have the muscles to pay you. They will not let it go. Facebook was Facebook. They know Facebook can become Orkut. Nobody will know like what is Facebook. They know that the need of the hour is WhatsApp. Facebook acquired WhatsApp. That being the reason for that, because the market entirely shifting from one platform to another platform. Okay. If I ask to all of you, like how many of times in a day we see WhatsApp and how many times in a day we see Facebook, maybe like 3-4 days we see once Facebook, right? They may be different, like people different using, but in normal parlance, we generally see WhatsApp. Every minute, every 5 minutes, we see the WhatsApp. That is the beauty of that. We see like a lot of the transaction that is happening on WhatsApp, lot of the buying, selling, everything happening on WhatsApp. So this is the thing, that if the company able to understand what is going to be the future, then only they can sustain. If they not able to look into like what is going to the future and just thinking like, okay, we continue forever like this, then you're not able to understand what is the market dynamics is. Okay. So for the young entrepreneur, what I suggest, that beautifully lay out, first of all, certain things. You make a very good website of yours. One, you make an advisory board of people who being strong in the background. You take those people in your advisory board whom you know, okay, and then you hire a good team. Like hiring a good team does not mean that I have to pay so much of the money to everybody. Take an example. Suppose I need very intelligent people, people from IIMs or IIT. I want that sort of stuff. Then what is happening? If these sort of stuff is required, then we can take it as interns in our organization. So this is how we can like look into like how we can utilize the brain, how we can harness the opportunity. Okay. So there are different ways and means to look at or do it. Okay. Next slide. Next slide. We can look into. Yeah, Nehan. Next slide you can look into. No, mute. You are mute. Nehan, you are mute. You can.
Tricky issues or after this?
There are tricky issues you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you make that slide visible to me? I can't see that slide. Tricky issues to valuation.
Yeah. Now you can
Yeah.
see.
No, I can't see that slide.
Just a second.
Yeah, now it's coming.
Now.
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. It's rotating. Yeah. Tricky. Yeah. So I will talk about certain tricky issues in valuation. And generally, when we say startup valuation, generally we say like discounted free cash flow is the methodology that we need to look at. And so one question that comes to the mind: pre-money or post-money? The investor, when they make investment, they look into the pre-money value or the post-money. I would say investor look both. Investors say on as it is basis, the way that you are carrying your business, how you are doing it. If I don't make investment in your company, then how you will grow and what is your future is. Suppose if I make investment into your company, I want to see post investment how your entire value chain will move. So the investor will need to look into like pre-money and post-money, how the valuation will going to be. With my money infusion, how it will go, and without my money, how the value is. One, terminal growth rate. When we when we say discounted free cash flow, just two parts. One is the explicit period, and another is the implicit period. That suppose 5 year is the period we have taken, and then after that the company will continue forever. So there is a general rule. We say 40% of the value need to be come from your initial 4 or 5 years, and the 60% value should be in your terminal part. Right? In your terminal, we apply the Gordon model and say that this is how the entire value will be there. So terminal growth rate is used to find the terminal value. Okay. It is majorly being dependent on the company, on the economy of the country, GDP growth rate factor, how the country is moving, how the GDP factor is moving. So this terminal growth rate is dependent on that. Now, one data has came post-COVID that India is GDP is a negative now. The negative numbers are coming. Should we apply negative while doing the valuation and taking the DCF? Because the government is suggesting and saying that the negative number is coming, minus 28%. So should I apply minus 28%? Actually, when we are saying valuation, we are looking into a long-term view of the business. We are not just looking into 6 months, 1 year. We are looking into a long-term basis, horizon basis, how the company. That may be a pandemic. Maybe it may continue even 1 more year. But the question is, it is bound to go away. Because human race is the most important race. Nobody can win from the human race. Nobody. Any virus, any bacteria, it may be. Of course, it takes time to develop the vaccine, but in the time to come, we all will get away from this pandemic and the business will start. It may be like certain changes we need to make in our habit, in our hygiene and all these things, maybe. But of course, it is not going to be forever like this. Okay, the business has started moving. Now, remember, like when it all started in March and April, then how scared we are. No, we should not go outside. We will not buy any food from outside. So many things we are taking. Now we feel, okay, fine. If this thing happened, then at least now there are the norms which are available. These are that you can go to hospital, then if the oxygen level comes down, you need the oxygen and all these things. So there are certain amount of visibility. Then we say that, okay, there are certain medicines also coming, and then there's a vaccine also coming. So we are just 3 months or 4 months there still left, then when the vaccine will be there. So let's see like what is going to the future. But the future is going to be more brighter than the way we are thinking in this current context. Because once something negative happens, the mind works in that direction only. Okay, the things will not improve, it will go like that, the children will not go to school and this thing and that thing. But it is bound to go in a positive direction in the time to come. Okay. Then projection validation, I already explained, like we need to look into the validating the projection, what the management has provided. I take an example. One company has provided a projection to us and the management, top management is adamant, no sir, this is going to take place. And that was into the lifestyle segment. And they are not willing to, no sir, I'm saying that your projections are hyperbolic, that is hyperinflated, it cannot sustain in the market. They are not willing to accept. And now the question arises. On one side, you can lose the business, that because you also have to earn the money as well, right? As at the same point of time, you as a valuer, you as a professional can't give so much of value to the company based on its projection. What to do then? Then what we can look into, we can increase the risk premium, and by increasing the risk premium, my cost of equity will go higher, and by increasing the cost of equity, my value as per this free cash flow discounting will come down. So there is a ways and means to how to look at, and because as a valuer, once you publish the report, you can't take a back step. Then you have to say that, okay, I have given, and based on what logic you have given. So it is very important as a valuer, we need to look into like whether my valuation report able to sustain the business model or not. Okay. Then another thing is beta. I'm not going too much of the detail of the beta. Beta of unlisted companies. We look into the beta factor of the comparable listed company and say that this is the beta factor. Beta measures the unsystematic risk of the business, systematic risk of the business, and it is majorly being dependent on the major economic factors like GDP, inflation, and all these things that being dependent on. Okay. Then the risk-free rate. Risk-free rate is basically generally we take the zero coupon bond on the government bond, 10-year government bond. But when I say is the zero coupon bond is 100% risk-free, somebody would say because the government backing is there and it is 100% risk-free. I would say no, because we need to look into the inflation. But suppose if I take on my FD, the bank is providing interest factor of 4.5% only. The inflation is becoming suppose 5%. It means that I'm losing, or the erosion in the value of my principal is taking place. So we need to understand whether risk-free is risk-free actually or not. Okay, but in general parlance, we take 10-year government bond for valuing my business. Next slide, please. Length of projection is also very important. Length of projection, when I say, somebody would say, how many years is relevant? 5 year, 4 year, 10 year. It all depends upon the industry you are into. Suppose there is a company which is into the dam making, it may take 10 years. If I'm valuing that company on 5-year projection basis, it's all negative value because the company has not yet started the revenue model. If I say tall bridge takes a number of years. I can't find the value in 5 years. So we need to look a longer horizon for these sort of companies. Suppose a company which is into the artificial intelligence, a company into the robotic science, these are the companies which can scale very well in a short period of time. Then we say, of course, like 5-year time is a good period. Okay. Somebody may come and say that because the government in India is for 5 years, so 5 years are relevant period. Okay, but we need to look into the industry and the sector which we are valuing, and based on that, my time horizon need to be till that point where my projection, my numbers reach to the maturity stage. Until and unless it has not reached to the maturity stage, I should go further. Then only I able to find the correct value. Okay, next slide, please. So there are different methods which I already explained. One important thing also I want to say, like there's a company called ITC. ITC is into hotel industry, ITC into tobacco, ITC is into FMCG. So it's just on consolidated numbers, applying the comparable company methodology, we say that this is the value of the company. Or on the consolidated financial projection, we find the DCF based on the consolidated financial projection, this is the value of the company. This is actually wrong. We need to find the sum of part method, like which particular, which for different segments, we need to find a different like value, like FMCG, okay, we need to look into the FMCG companies, comparable company, and apply the method. If we are using the for tobacco, we need to look into the tobacco segment. If we are seeing it for the hotel, we need to look into the hotel, and then we need to consolidate later on. So this is the way of finding the companies which have diversified businesses. Okay. Next slide, please. Next slide. And this is already explained. Price or value of finding. Next, yeah, please, next. Yeah. Now this slide is very important and relevant. When I say discount and premium, there are certain amount of discount that exist. Okay. When I say key percent discount, suppose Narayan Murthy was the chairman of Infosys, and the news comes that Narayan Murthy is taking an exit as a chairman, and then what happened? The stock on that particular day of Infosys have fallen down. So there are certain key persons which also makes very important. Suppose you are valuing a company and you see like in the last 3 months, a lot of the top brass of the company, they have started leaving the company. Then you need to see and be cautious about that why these people are leaving. Is there's some information they must be knowing as an insider, and because of that they are leaving the company. So these are also maybe a very important point to look at while valuing the company. Okay. Then discount for contingent liabilities. If there are contingent liability, we need to look into that and provide a discount. And then tax, every valuation we do post-tax basis. Suppose we apply the PE multiple, it is post-tax, right? We apply the EBITDA multiple, it is post-tax. Every valuation, even if the discounted free cash flow, we are finding the free cash flow post-tax, that is PAT plus depreciation and this. So we are all things doing post-tax basis. Discount for shareholder level now, like there are two discount for lack of control and discount for lack of marketability. Discount of lack of marketability already explained, when I compare myself with listed peer companies, those companies have the marketability and my company, private limited company, don't have the marketability, so there will be the discount on the multiple as well. When I say discount on lack of control, now comes a very tricky question, like why we are saying discount on lack of control. When we are saying valuation as per discounted free cash flow, this valuation is a control valuation. This valuation is a control transaction because the investor who is making the investment in a company, he been looking into the future projection, future model, everything he is looking at. So the valuation that we are giving under discounted free cash flow, that's a control valuation. Now, when I say comparable company method, this valuation is majorly the minority valuation. This is not the control valuation. Suppose Reliance share in the market is suppose 2,000 rupees per share as on date, suppose. And I, as a retail investor, want to take the shares of Reliance. What I have to do? I just have to log into iccidirect.com, sharekhan.com or Reliance Money and then log in and say that at market price 2,000 rupees I am purchasing and I will get those shares at 2,000 rupees. Suppose I being a investor, Bain Capital and I be making investment into Reliance and saying that I will be taking suppose 5% stake of Reliance. The Reliance will say, okay, fine, I need the money you provide to me. And I would say, sir, because your price is 2,000 rupees, so at 2,000 rupees, I will make investment as well. Okay. They will say, no, sir, that is for the retailers. Retailers don't come and ask any question to us. They just attend the annual general meeting. They don't attend the board of directors meeting. They don't lay any restriction to us. Okay. But you are a person who been looking into our projections and everything. So when you say as an investor you are coming, you need to pay one thing more over and above the market price, and that is called the control premium. So control premium, because you are taking a certain amount of control or rights over and above. So I've been charging a control premium from you. So that is how the transaction takes place in the market. But when I say market mein 2,000 rupees price is moving, then it means that this price is for retailers. This price is not for any control transaction, any investment round. This is just for the retailers who can come, go, take the shares today, stay invested or take an exit. But they are not coming to us asking questions in the board meeting, in my day-to-day affair, in anything, right? So this is how the discount on lack of control plays the game. Another example I place, suppose there are 3 shareholders, one is having 48% stake, another is having 49% stake, okay? And the remaining 3% stake being held by third. Who is the most powerful in this all? Somebody would say 49% is the highest, so it is going to be the highest power. I would say 3% will be going to be the highest, because with this 3%, with whomsoever it goes, he will become the majority. Okay, so we need to look into certain stages or what is the the stake, that who can guide whom. In a election, even a person in a minority party, they command, boss, you make my person as a CM, then only I will give you, otherwise no government will be formed of yours. So that is how, even with a small minority shareholding, because you are sitting at a strategic percentage, you command a value proposition. Okay. Next slide, please. Next slide we can take. So control premium is general. This is the most relevant slide. Tricky issues I will give you a brief of the explanation on this. Terminal growth rate I already explained. ESOP valuation, can DCF be directly used by calculating ESOP value or some adjustment is required? So when I say ESOP is a minority valuation because the employees are getting a very minuscule amount of shares as an ESOP from the ESOP pool that been created, and they can't command anything. So that is the minority value. When we are finding the DCF, suppose we are doing the valuation as per DCF, that is a control value. We have to deduct the discount on lack of control and then come to the minority level. Okay. Now there may be certain instrument. It may not always be the pure equity. Suppose somebody is making investment in your company. He is not taking the equity. He's saying that I need certain amount of certain aggregate advantage, certain benefit, certain preferential rights, and that is called compulsory convertible preference shares. It may be in the format of the CCD. So these are the instruments which will get converted later into equity, right? They are not being issued as on date as equity, but which may get converted later into equity. So now these days, most of the investment that is taking place, it is not on the basis of the equity, because you've been suppose a startup, starting a company with 1 lakh rupees. And suppose somebody is coming and saying that, okay, I will make investment of 5 crores. Now how you can do it, right? So now instead of going into the pure equity play, we can go into the CCPS and saying that it will get converted later on 3 years down the line, and you will get the equity shares based on the certain conversion ratio, or maybe based on certain performance of the company in the time to come. Okay, this is very relevant these days. Then we need to look into diluted number of shares. Now take example that suppose you are valuing the company, and in that company there are CCD, there is a CCPS, there is a ESOP, and then we need to find the value on a diluted basis. We have to look into that. One day these CCPS will get converted into equity, and what is the conversion ratio is. So we need to look into the diluted number of shares, and whatsoever the money that been coming from the through these instruments, we should take in the numerator, and in the denominator we should take the number of shares corresponding to them, and then find the diluted number of shares. Okay. Levered and unlevered beta. Generally the beta which we talk in the market is a levered beta, and levered beta is one which is specific to a company. What we need to do, we need to unlever it first and re-lever it again with the debt equity structure of my company. So it is called unlevering it and then again levering it. Okay. So this is how we look into it. Next slide, we can move. This is already I explained. Non-operating assets. Non-operating assets does not become the part when we say that valuing the business for the investor perspective. Next slide. So this slide now is very relevant. You can take the picture of this. It talks about what is a minority value, what is a control value. When we say, like, look into discounted free cash flow, it's a control value. Comparable transaction, it's a control value. Comparable company, it's a minority value. Net asset value and book value basis minority value, and fair value basis control value. Okay, suppose there being a company which being started in the year 1895, and they have the land banks, but in the balance sheet they've been coming on historical basis. And when we look into the real worth of the land banks today in the today context, that will be huge in numbers, right? That will be crores and crores of rupees. So we need to look into what is the fair value of those assets are. Okay. Yeah, next slide. Now this is a very beautiful example of the venture capital funding. Like when the venture capital firms comes and make investment, how the investment take place. They don't go into your like DCF and all these things. They look into, okay, who is the promoter? Okay, what is the business model? How scalable it is? And we know the game, how to make this business run very well. Because these days today, the investors know how to run the game, right? So when I say invest, suppose he's saying that I've been making an investment of $1 million today, and I have the expectation from you that I will get a return of 25% year on year. Term is 5 years. That is 5 years the period for which I'm making investment. Revenue as on date in my business is $0.5 million. Okay. And year 5 net income. In the 5th year, the net income I'm presuming based on your projection that is going to be $1.5 million. And I've been expecting that I will take an exit after 5 years at a 10x, that at least 10 times of my investment, I need a return of my investment. So how to go about it? So it is helpful in determining like what stake he should take by making investment of 1 million with these terms and conditions. So required future value of investment is $1 million and return is 25% for 5 years. So required future value will be $3.05 million. Now at that point, the company is expected to be worth exit value of the company. I'm saying that in the 5th year, the revenue is going to be $1.5 million and I will take 10x multiple. So $15 million is the exit value of the company. That's already been pre-decided. Hence the venture capital must own how much? That is 3.05 divided by 15, that is 20.3%. So he should command 20.3% by making investment of $1 million at a rate of 25% return with expectation of 25% return for a period of 5 years. So this is how that being calculated, that what stake dilution will take place. Okay. Next slide, please. Now, this is the thing that I've been talking in the very initial phase, like for a startup, what the investor looks at. This is the scorecard methodology, which talks about like what is the size of opportunity, grouping the promoter, founder, the stage at which you are. So this talks about the core team you have. So there are certain positive factors, there are certain negative factors, and then we have to club it and find that, okay, what is the consolidated score that you are getting? And based on that score determines the value proposition. Okay, next slide. So suppose you've been running a startup and you come to somebody who being the valuer and saying that this is going to be the projection of my company. Whenever you will provide the projection, you will provide it in a most optimistic manner that, okay, this is going to take place and this is how I will run my business model. Now the question arises, as a valuer, should I take it like that only? I will look into the various scenarios. What is going to be the optimistic, what is going to be the survival average growth scenario, or what is going to be the low growth scenario. And based on that, I will assign certain probability factor and then find, like, based on that, what is the value that is coming. And this method is called First Chicago method, which talks about scenario methodology. And after that, we apply the scorecard that what we have calculated previously, 0.59 in this case, suppose. So I'm saying that my value is coming, suppose 754. Okay. Now this 754, if you look into what you have provided the equity value of 2421 is the equity value. Okay. And under the most optimistic scenario, but as a valuer or as an investor, the value you are getting is 754. So keep in mind, whatsoever the projection that you are saying, the investor will always say that I don't know what is going to be the future, because the model is still not traveled certain number of years, and I don't know. So based on that, at least like 40%, 50% your value will get down from the mind of the investor. Okay, so you need to build your backup and saying that, okay, sir, the things what I worked upon is on a conservative side. I've already inculcated in my model all the risk factors, like what is going to be. So this is the way, like, where the negotiation takes place. Okay, it is not only about the valuer game, it is more also about how the promoter able to justify the business model. Next slide, please. So this is all. It will better if we go into the question answer. If anybody you have the questions, because there will be certain questions you have in mind.
It was a wonderful session, and I'm inviting Richa, Vice President, Association of Women in Business, to take the question and answers which are in the chat box. Richa, over to you.
Right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I can.
So there was a small request from Mr. Palekar. He wanted to the recording and the session content to be shared with him. So we would request Mr. Manish, would it be possible to share the content with our participants, sir?
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
You can always do so.
I will share the content.
Right, and there's another question by Ms. Khushbu Manek. She says, for private limited companies, like you told, that there are dummy expenses to reduce tax liability, or say personal expenses to be personal expenses of the management. How to normalize profits for these kinds of transactions? Is it normalized profit acceptable for valuation?
Yeah, right. Very right question that being asked. Always, like whenever we apply any method, we should always normalize the numbers. Okay. Suppose, take example. Suppose I've been saying that airline industry was going at this much of profitability in the last 3 or 5 years, and because of the COVID, everything has came to zero for the 3 months or 4 months when there was no flight. Okay. Now, if I say that today, like taking into only consideration like what is today the market is, I've been just saying that it is going to the future, then I've been talking about something which is very different. So I have to normalize the thing first. So now the question arises like how to go about and normalize it. It is not only the P&L statement, we need to look into the trial balance. And by looking into the trial balance, you can look into like what sort of expenses that being booked. And then you can ask the management, sir, and there will be hefty numbers. So you have to look at how, what are the expenses which are so hefty in nature, which are bringing the profitability down. Okay. You can always raise a question to this. Okay. So we need to always normalize it before applying. And I would suggest if that being the case, because there will be the tussle going to happen, because the management will say, no, no, sir, this is that thing. So it will be better that you don't apply the PE multiple. It will be better you apply the EBITDA multiple, and that will be helpful in saving both the company as well you while applying the methodology part. Okay.
Richa, we have another question.
Yes, sir. There's another question about how to value your idea as a startup, or a new or a unique idea is there. How do we value?
Very difficult to answer because there's no like concrete answer which exists for this. But I would suggest certain thing like when you say that I have the idea. Suppose I being a student, suppose I take example, I being a student, I being studying in IIT, and I have developed certain thing, and I think that I can create a breakthrough in the market. Suppose there's a company called Paytm, and I can create something which can be very useful to Paytm, and then Paytm can adopt my technology part. Okay, so I have the idea for that, as well as I have the like I know how to implement that idea. It is not only about that I have the idea. I can have a beautiful idea, but I don't know how to implement it. Okay. Another scenario. I have the idea. I don't know the technicalities. I can go and talk to somebody who maybe from a technical background, and if he says, okay, whatever you are saying, that is very viable, and that we can make a model for that, and then we can go for implementing that part, and then we can present it as a prototype to somebody. So that is a way looking forward. But just having the idea, thinking, and I will do this thing, I should do this thing and that thing, it will not going to, because idea don't have value. Ideas have value when it comes along with the implementation, when it comes along with the team, when it comes along with the background that you are having. Okay. I can think like, okay, Sundar Pichadi is doing this thing, is making like a search engine. I should also start making the search engine. But I not being from the technical background. I being a commerce graduate. I don't know anything about that. So it may be just my idea. It may be I talk to somebody who may be a very expert, and he knows how to go about it. He says, okay, I can become your co-founder. You look into the marketing strategy. I will go into the technical side, and then we can club the things together, and then we can take the company forward. Of course, then it has a value proposition. So it all depends whether you have the capability for implementing or not. If you have those things in place, it has the value proposition. If you don't have, it does not have the value proposition.
Thank you, Mr. Manish. I hope that answers your question, Mr. Jignesh Gandhi.
Yeah, it does to a large extent.
Great. Over to you, Nehal. Is there anything else that we need to conclude with?
If the question and answer session is over, Richa, now I will welcome you for the official validatory session. And before I invite you, I would like to invite Divya Rajput, President of Association of Women in Business also. So over to you, Richa.
Thank you, Nehal. And I am very, very thankful to Mr. Manish for this insightful session. As much as we all know that valuation is an analytical process of determining the fair value of an asset or a firm, but can be quickly be impacted by various market forces and the dynamics, the industry dynamics that play. And the expert valuation needs to be remodeled and retooled based on external factors. And that being in the frame of mind, an entrepreneur needs to be ready with different valuations for different purposes, for example, for an investment purpose or for a self-valuation purpose or for various other things. And being in the entrepreneurial community and serving them for quite some time now, we see huge variations between a perceived valuation because there's so much sentiment attached to your own business vis-a-vis an expert validated valuation of the firm. So as an entrepreneur, it becomes very important for you to understand your industry, competition, the future prospects and the challenges that comes forth while doing a fair valuation and justifying your efforts also in your company. Sometimes yourselves as well. So there sometimes you need expert valuation, and for that we have experts like Mr. Manish also available. And thanks for the insightful session. I'm sure every one of us can dive much deeper into and spend hours into understanding how do we value our firms and look at various intricacies involved. So with this, I leave you all, and I have my deepest gratitude to Nehal and Arkin Advisory for arranging this session, and to all the people who contribute to the entrepreneurial community to advance their businesses and to adapt in the space of this business. Also, just to tell you about Association of Women in Business, AWIB as we call it, is a global community unleashing women's potential by inspiring, empowering, educating and endorsing women leaders and innovation across all fields. We stand for nurturing and sustaining positive change. We are very grateful for everyone who entrusts women for their emotional intelligence in leading successful businesses. Thank you all, and we've had a great session. I would now like to ask Divya Rajput, President of AWIB, to say a few words before we leave.
Welcome, Divya.
Hi, Nehal.
Yes,
Good evening,
Divya.
everyone. Yeah, hi, everyone. And I think that was such an important topic for a very simple reason because, nothing works unless we have a fair idea of the value of the company. I mean, whether it is about creating value, for your stakeholders, or whether it is creating value for the team, or whether it is, raising external funding, I think it's always good to have a fair idea about the valuation. And thank you, Manish sir. That was a wonderful session. I mean, of course, I joined in a little late, but I am looking forward to receive the recording of the session, and we will definitely stay connected. So thank you, Richa, for representing AWIB, and Nehal. We are big fans of your sessions. So keep up the good work.
Thank you, Divya and Richa, for support as ever. And thank you, Manishji. You initially you told that whether valuation is art or science, I should say it's a pure math. If you master the math, and I must say you are the master of that math. And thank you all the participants for this interactive and wonderful session. And stay connected with us. We will be bringing in more sessions like this on the legal and financial and compliance aspect. So do stay tuned on our social media, and we will share the recording of this session. Thank you. Have a great Sunday.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Have a great day.